Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me this afternoon. I know it's reasonably hot and it's reasonably late in the afternoon, so I'm going to aim off being too technical. I'm probably going to aim off the agenda a bit as well, actually. I might stray into resolution and not stick to potential. Stephen, interrupt me if I go on too long. I have a passion for this topic. So my job at Bank of America essentially is to manage the international capital. So that's anything outside the US balance sheet. We cross around 35 different countries globally. The reason we do that is because it allows us to support our customers. We deal with big corporations. We lend money to them. We sell them hedging products, allow them to risk manage their businesses. As you can probably imagine, and I'm not asking for sympathy here, but it's reasonably challenging when you're dealing with 35 different regulators on a day-to-day basis. It's fair to say they are all reasonably different states of evolution. Important to my job, however, is understanding what the regulatory environment looks like and how it's likely to change. That's important for two reasons. One, if we need to do anything with the corporate structure, it takes time. Moving debt, moving equity around the organisation, moving holdcos, whatever, does take time. Boards are generally, nervous is probably the wrong word, but they take a huge amount of responsibility for what's happening in their corporate structures. The other thing, which is probably even more important, is the impact on strategy and the business model. We have to look at return, we have to understand where we're making our money, where we're not making our money, and that's the responsibility we have to our shareholders. So it's never a boring day when I go into the office, that's for sure. I think it's worth, just building on Gonzales, what you were talking about. I can get this to work. Here we go. So I've got some graphs. Gonzales, you had all the numbers, so I've got the graphs. It's just worth touching on where we've come from. These graphs only go back to 2011. I suspect if you went back further, certainly on CET1, it would be a lot lower. The other issue with CET1 was that there was no clear definition. I remember during the crisis, 2008, 2009, there were multitudes of definitions of CET1. Interestingly, there were multitude definitions of leverage ratio. In my old company, we came up with 91 different ways of trying to put it in the annual report. Needless to say, the finance director wasn't too keen on that. But I think what you can take away from these is that the probability of default, I'm not a credit guy, but taking some of their terminology, the PDs, the probability of default for the sector is much, much lower. I think you'd also say that the exposure at default is lower. A lot of the banks have taken out tail risk. Part of the crisis was that none of this stuff could be valued. When you had structured products on or whatever, nobody really understood the risks in there and the liquidity around those products. And I think the loss given default is also going to be lower given the resolution capital's coming in. So you're looking at a world with a much safer banking system. And I think we in the banking sector absolutely think that's the right way to go, and we support our policymakers in their desire to make the system safer. You don't want to be in a position where taxpayers have to come in. I think the other really important point from a practical standpoint, within banks now, the tools are much more embedded. Stress testing is part of the culture of the organisation. The way that people make decisions, the way that directors think about their capitalisation is driven to a large degree by stress testing. And full credit to the regulators for actually putting pressure on banks to do that. I remember back in the mid-2000s, you'd walk into the board and you'd say, well, okay, oil's going to go to $100 and base rate's going to be at 0.5. And they'd say, really? Is that going to happen? Well, it did. So stress testing is very, very powerful. People can engage in it. And I think the other point is that there's a lot more indicators out there. Banks have lots and lots of different indicators, triggers, so people are much more alert to impending market stress or whatever that may be. However, and there's always a however. Oops. There we go. Business models. So business models take time to adjust, particularly in banking. And I think the speed of that process is driven or hindered by uncertainties. And there's a number of uncertainties out there, as we know. Political, I won't say any more on that. Economic, and regulatory. So not surprisingly, I was just going to focus in on the regulatory side. And I've heard lots of encouraging conversations today about how we're moving forward and making progress. Basel III is sort of getting there. Basel IV, still a bit of a way to go, I would imagine. And on the resolution side, I think we are moving forward. There's a lot of good dialogue and conversations around that. There is a specific issue that I wasn't going to get technical, but I will get technical at one point, which is on the IPU. There's an issue that we're looking at from an American bank, and I know other jurisdictions have this issue as well, to the extent that you're going to have an IPU in EU. We totally get why the supervisors and the resolution authorities would seek to do that. However, to the extent it conflicts with home regulation and law, it can be problematic, particularly if you've got a bank and a broker-dealer business. So we're having lots of conversations at the moment in Brussels around that and briefing counterparties wherever they may be. Lots going on. I think if I was to summarise my asks, and I'll probably do this on the wrap-up as well, the sooner we can get clarity to the end state, the better. Everybody says that in the banking world. It's worth just reiterating. I think the consistency of approach is really important. A level playing field across jurisdictions, very hard to do because there's so many moving parts and a lot of complexity around that. And I think the third point is around resolution. So trust among supervisors. If you believe in an SPE approach, that takes trust. And actually, when the crisis hits and money moves around, how does that actually play out in practice? But we would ask for that. At Bank of America, we spend a huge amount of time on resolution, simplifying our structures, making sure we understand how they work. It is built around a single point of entry resolution strategy. Top of the house gets bailed in. It then cascades down through the organisation. And that does feed into the general conversation around internal TLAC, internal MREL, and those sorts of things. So I guess my kind of stand back is, we understand the complexities around the changes in the regulatory world. It's not easy stuff, but we're here to serve our customers. And the more certainty we can get out of the regulatory framework, the easier it is for us to adjust business model as appropriate.